we did, I think, really good, smart, impactful bills that are going to make a difference for people. And that's what I came up here to do, focusing really on housing, homelessness, and healthcare. The 3 H's are what we were focusing on. Those are issues I've worked on, issues close to my heart that I'm really passionate about, and issues that people in the district really care about. And so I think that in a lot of ways, my background, what I'm passionate about, is a really good fit for the district. And we're bringing back bills that remove red tape to get housing online much more quickly.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined by Assemblywoman Pilar Schiavo. Pilar, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
It's going good.
I know you had brand new this year, right? This is your
Yes.
first year, first session, and you kind of had like a storybook, I guess election, kind of a way here. I think I remember seeing on
It's
Twitter.
a story. I don't know if it's storybook.
You had a very close race,
Very close.
unseated an incumbent, right?
The only one in the state to unseat a Republican incumbent, yeah.
And you drove your electric car haphazardly up the 5 last minute with no battery power, something like that.
No, it just took 4 hours because that's what it takes
took a
sometimes
while.
when you have
Yeah.
an electric car.
Yeah.
4 extra hours to drive from LA to Sacramento. Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
So kind of tell us a little bit about yourself before you decided to run for assembly. What were you doing?
So before I actually worked in the labor movement for 20 years. So I had done a whole bunch of things, recruited and trained union organizers. I did a lot of political organizing. I worked for California Nurses Association for 13 years, where for the most part, I was building coalitions around different campaigns, different issues, supporting nurses and fighting for healthcare, and fighting for just kind of larger economic justice issues to support workers, which I loved that job very much. I love working with nurses. They're smart and fierce and amazing. And then my last 3 years with the nurses, actually, I did disaster relief work. So I deployed nurses to disaster areas, humanitarian missions. It's kind of like Doctors Without Borders, but for nurses. So that was amazing work to do as well. And then I got a crazy idea to run for office, and I had to quit my job to do it, which was very scary as
Why?
a
Why'd
single
you have
mom.
to quit?
Just kind of policy
Yeah.
of the organization. Didn't want to, I think, confuse things with me doing political work, or well, I wasn't at that time actually, but anyway, have things confused with me running as a candidate and representing the organization.
What made you want to run?
Honestly, it was a fleeting thought through my head when I was in a meeting at work, hearing about some of the challenges of getting bills carried in Sacramento.
Right.
And I said, you know what, just go up there and do it myself.
And in your experience, your first year experience, what being in the shoes of hearing oh, it's hard to get stuff done, to actually coming here and doing it?
Yeah.
What's
you
that
see
like?
how hard it is to get stuff done. It's definitely eye-opening, I think, because I've been doing, political work and lobbying and advocacy for many years. There wasn't a lot that surprised me in terms of kind of what the job would be and what the work would be like. But how slow and incremental change is frustrating when you're on the outside of the building, and continues to be frustrating on the inside of the building.
So I remember maybe it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
There's this big push for universal healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And
SB 562.
There was a bunch of nurses who would chase Anthony Rendon around all the time, everywhere. That stopped.
Yeah.
Why?
I think at the end of the day, you have to also work together and be able to get to 41 votes. And that was really unfortunate. I worked a lot on that with our coalition and at the field campaign part of that. And I think it was a really good, strong bill. And it was a heartbreaker. But I know also that, it's really hard to get big sweeping policy passed. And we've been doing that for 30 years and it hasn't happened yet. So, there was a little bit of a different approach this year with SB 770 by Scott Wiener, which I carried on the assembly side, which moves the ball forward by just saying, hey, we got to go start talking to the feds about how we get a waiver to get all of those federal dollars that we need to cover everybody in California on healthcare and answer the questions that I think a lot of my colleagues have. And I've been hearing since I've been, inside talking with folks, people have these questions that still need to be answered. And this is one of the big questions. Can we get those federal dollars? How are we going to pool all of this money together to have the dollars we need to be able to do it? I know that we save money. The most recent study by the Healthy California for All Commission that that was put together by the governor and the legislature. It was the first state commissioned report and study that said we would save $500 billion over the next 10 years if we instituted a unified financing system or single payer.
Sounds pretty good.
It saves a lot of money. And our healthcare costs are just going up and up and up. I mean, I heard...
As somebody who pays for somebody's health insurance, I can tell you,
Right? I talked to constituents
and they
of
never
mine.
Use it.
Right. You don't use it. Your benefits don't get better even though the costs go up. And, I talked to constituents of mine who pay more for health insurance than they do for their mortgage. It is crushing people. And coming out of the labor movement, I saw at the bargaining table, so much money on the table goes just to pay for healthcare increases. It doesn't go to pensions or wages. It's all of this money is taken out of workers' pockets to pay for insurance companies. And so there's a lot of money that we're missing there. When I started doing this work over a decade ago, before I got into it at CNA, there was a whole effort to have school districts by CSEA at the time calculate how much they would save if we transitioned to a single payer system. LAUSD, and this is almost 20 years ago now, calculated that they would save $300 million a year. So if you multiply that by 20 years, that's $6 billion they would have saved in the last 20 years.
Like all these companies that go self-insured or whatever, they save so much money.
Yeah, because you cut out a middleman, and that's where a lot of savings is.
So who's opposed to this? The middleman.
The middleman might be opposed to it. They might not like that idea. Yeah, but I think, I think that there needs to be a new conversation about this issue because I heard a lot of discussion with the healthcare minimum wage, that people were talking about. It was a big policy and piece of legislation passed this year, authored by Senator Durazo. And, there was a lot of concern about how do we pay for this? The hospitals and clinics that are mostly on Medi-Cal, right? We know Medi-Cal doesn't cover the cost of care. It's too low. We need more money to fund folks on Medi-Cal. And so this is literally a dedicated fund of a source of funding for healthcare that would go to really increase access to care, pay for more providers, address inequities like, you can't get providers in low-income communities or in rural communities. This would make sure that people are being paid and actually reimbursed at a level that pays for the cost of care so that it would entice people to work in rural communities and low-income communities. It would build up our public health infrastructure and support the infrastructure that's already there to provide care to more people. Right. So, and it saves us billions of dollars. I don't see a lot of bills coming through that would save us billions of dollars. So you got bipartisan support on this since it saves so much money? I think we should. I mean, conservatives you should check out this film called Fix It. And it talks to conservatives in Canada who said they decided not to come to the United States and open a business because the cost of healthcare was so much. And they're like, it makes business sense. I don't understand why Republicans in the United States don't support it, because it does make business sense. I mean, people don't start businesses. They don't hire employees, all because the cost of healthcare is so expensive. There are so many ripple effects in our economy because of it.
I've kind of noticed a trend. There seems to be like a lot of newly elected who are coming kind of with a similar background as you, kind of former union organizers and stuff like that. Why is that? Why do you think you guys are finally kind of coming in? You're kind of, I guess, seeing how the process is working and you guys want to jump in yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think, after working for 20 years on the front lines of so many issues that I care deeply about and being frustrated that you hit a wall so often at the Capitol, that you want to get inside and be able to move the ball forward. I also have worked a lot on homelessness, which is something I really care a lot about. I co-founded an organization in my district working on homelessness. And so, for me,
Right.
it's another aspect of economic justice, right? People who are at the lowest point of our economic ladder, just in desperate poverty. And there's a lot of work to do in that area, and especially being on the front lines of that issue and seeing how policy is failing was incredibly frustrating when you see people suffering as a result of it.
Right. So, we're talking off camera right now. You live in Chatsworth,
Mm-hmm.
but where did you grow up? Did you grow up in that area or somewhere else?
I actually grew up in Sonora, which is near
Oh, up
Yosemite.
here, yep.
Yeah, up here,
Okay.
not too far from here, a couple hours. So, so I grew up in the foothills, in the mountains, hiking and swimming in rivers and lakes, and it was a really great place to grow up. And my dad was a logger when I was younger. So my mom would load us up at the end of the school year, and we'd go camp wherever my dad was logging in the Pacific Northwest, and we would camp all summer long for like 3 months and see these beautiful places, mountains and rivers and waterfalls. And so I grew up really having a deep appreciation for nature, which is, I think, one of the reasons I ended up in Chatsworth, because when I drove down Topanga and saw these beautiful Santa Susana Mountains there with these huge red rock boulders and these green bushes. It was so beautiful. I can walk to hiking trails from my house, so I'm very lucky.
That's awesome. So then how did you go from Sonora to Chatsworth? How'd you end up down south?
Well, there was a lot that happened in between there. I went to undergrad at Sonoma State. I went up to Oregon, and I worked there a couple years for an Indian tribe for their Tribal Head Start program. And helped kids and families transition into kindergarten from the Head Start and find cultural supportive services to follow them along. That's actually how I got interested in the labor movement. I was learning a lot about early childhood brain development, and the one thing that impacts every aspect of a child's brain development is the economics of their family. And so I realized if I really wanted to help families, that I needed to and kids, that I wanted to change the economics of their families. And that kind of led me to the labor movement. When you get a contract and suddenly you have health care and you didn't, and you have a living wage or you didn't, and you have a pension and you didn't, it's that my dad got a union job. He became an electrician later in life. And, my family, my parents are retired and on his pension and not in poverty because of that. And we saw healthcare for the first time in our family when he got that union job, or he could, have a sick day and not worried about losing pay. It changed the economics of our family. And, I believed it really could make a huge difference in people's lives. So I went to grad school at UMass Amherst in labor studies. And
where's that? In Massachusetts?
Massachusetts, yeah. In Amherst, Western Massachusetts, also rivers.
Was it before Romney Care? Or?
It was before. Yeah, it was before. And that was a huge change to our healthcare. But and then I came back to California. I worked doing political work. I was actually in the Bay Area for a little while. Did political work there and started working for the nurses there. I worked also for a board of supervisor in San Francisco. And did legislative work. So I got my taste of how you make policy and bring it from the beginning to the end. And then we actually moved down to LA because my stepdaughter, her mom had remarried and they'd moved out of the state, but they moved back to Northridge. And so we wanted to be closer to her. So we moved down to LA and popped around a little bit. And then when I got divorced, I found a home in Chatsworth that I loved. And my daughter went to the neighborhood school there. And and just, was working for the nurses. And then this all popped up.
And so, it comes to run for assembly. You have experience as, an organizer. How did that help you in your election?
Oh my gosh, incredibly. As an organizer, I really believe in the power of face-to-face conversations and one-on-one conversations. And so from the very start, I thought it was really critical that we had really strong field, and we knocked on those doors and we did, phone calls. And I called personally over 1,000 voters myself. I knocked on many
Did you
doors.
go back and check to see if they voted for you or not? Did you do that? Are there any analytics on this afterwards?
I didn't. But I'm going to take their word for it. If they people were honest. Some people were undecided at the end of our conversation,
What's the most memorable conversation you had?
Oh gosh. I don't know. What always struck me as funny was people would be really surprised that I was calling them myself. Yeah. They're like, really? I think one guy didn't believe that I was calling him. I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's me. Right. But, just coming from, being grassroots organizer basically and, coalition builder, for people to have kind of some star effect because I called them personally was a little strange. But I think, it's so important for them to have direct communication with people representing them. And it really helped me to have a really good pulse on what folks are thinking and feeling in the district. Right. And I take those stories and conversations and the issues that people brought to me in those conversations with me every day in the work.
And how many votes did you win by? It was pretty close.
522.
Oh, wow.
It was very close, and I did not pull ahead.
Normally that'd be the closest, but there was like a couple others that were like 11 or like 40.
I know. Wow. We had quite a few close ones this year. Yeah, it was a wild election year. But yeah, the second to the last day of counting, I finally pulled ahead. I was down by I think 9,000 votes.
What were the
election
thoughts and
night.
Feelings like going through those? What it takes like.
Oh God, right? It was the worst. It was the worst. I was having a heart attack like every day.
Because everyone thinks, oh, you have your election, you have your party.
No party. Well, we had a party on election night, but I was also down 9,000 votes. It was wild. I was up like 24,000 votes at the beginning and then 12 and then down by 9. It was a total roller coaster election night. And then every day after there, they were just counting them every other day, which at least gave me a day to breathe and know that nothing was going to change. But then LA County started counting them every day. So then I just had to have a heart attack every single day while I was anticipating where it was going to go. And it was always going in the right direction, except for there were a couple dips. And I was like, oh no, this is not going to work out. But it all depended on how many votes were out there. If there's enough votes out there, we could surpass her. And if there weren't, then, we could have been.
It was crazy. We talked to Melissa Hurtado on Tuesday before the final vote count. She was down a couple thousand. And there was a couple thousand left. And I was like, you have to get like 90% of these votes for it to flip your way. And she's like, yeah, we're confident about it. I was like, wow. And it happened. I was like, wow.
Isn't that wild? It was wild. I know. We were doing a lot of math. There was a lot of math. Like, if there's this many votes, then we need this percentage. Right.
Because they know whose votes are out there, right? Or who's like where they're from.
I mean, you don't know, though, because, they're county-wide. Right. So you don't know how many are in your district. We had no idea. There were speculations about what turnout was and what percentage it would be, but would percentage in our district be the same as countywide? There's you don't know. There's a lot of guessing.
Historically, how long has this seat been a Republican seat?
Until Christy Smith flipped it in 2018, it had always been Republican. And then she flipped it for the first time. And then when she jumped to run for Congress, we lost it. There were 5 Democrats jumped in. They split the vote so much that the 2 Republicans advanced.
The Steve Fox area.
It was Suzette Valladares, and
thank God they found you.
One other, I know. So at least when I ran, there were only 2 Democrats that time.
So you get up here, you're in Sacramento, you have like this last minute, I won, and you drive up, and it takes you forever.
It was a different time, but yes, that did happen too. As I recall,
like all like the newly electeds though were up here meeting for
the
speaker, right?
I'm like seeing their pictures on Twitter. Yeah. They're up here getting oriented, and I'm just like waiting for the vote count to come in that day. The one good thing was I took my kid to the zoo the next day, so I was at the zoo while the whole speaker vote was going on. So
you were out of that.
I was like, I'm at the zoo, have fun. But Yeah, I really was sad to miss out on that. They had some later orientations for us. So me and a few other folks were in that together. And then the biggest fear for me was everyone had been hiring staff and I was so behind. And so, we found out the Saturday night before Thanksgiving, we found out I pulled ahead and there was basically no mathematical way to lose at that point. And so celebrated with a couple people. And then the next morning, Sunday morning, I woke up like 7 a.m. and I'm like, is it too early to start texting people? I start texting people. I'm like, I need stuff. Send me referrals. So I just, as quickly as possible, tried to find out what staff are still around. I was very fortunate. I got incredible staff. I
Did you know some of these people from before?
I didn't know. Well, my district staff, I knew all of them. Yeah, I have great district staff. But Sacramento, no, it was all new to me, and they're like a well-oiled machine, just incredible, amazing staff. I'm very lucky.
Can we show people this, like the
Oh
coolest
yeah,
thing?
one of them made
she pulled out
this.
These are all of her bills on this little card.
My little cheat sheet.
Some members come in here, they have like pages and pages. No, this is good staff right here.
Short and sweet. I know. Yeah. He's brilliant. Very good at crafting too.
Laminated and everything.
I know. So, yeah, I'm a fan. I've been showing, my members have been jealous. I pulled this out.
I know,
and
you
they're
should
like,
show
what
other
is
members.
that?
This is like.
I know.
Yeah.
It's going to be the next new thing.
You better hold on to that staff member.
Yes, this will be in my mementos of my first year.
So kind of what was the first year like? Coming up, getting your bill packages, going through appropriations. Suspense. How was your first session? How did it end up?
I think really good. I mean, I'm very, very proud of, we were able to pass 9 bills. We have a few that are 2-year bills still. And
how many did you start with?
Started with, well, let's count here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17. 17.
So better than 50%.
Better than 50%. A couple of these are still alive as 2-year bills. So we lost 5 in assembly appropriations, the Senate appropriations. Somehow I made it all the way through. But we did, I think, really good, smart, impactful bills that are going to make a difference for people. And that's what I came up here to do, focusing really on housing, homelessness, and healthcare. The 3 H's are what we were focusing on. And then some other, environmental district bills, gun safety, stuff like that too. But those are issues I've worked on, issues close to my heart that I'm really passionate about, and issues that people in the district really care about. Yeah. And so I think that in a lot of ways, my background, what I'm passionate about, is a really good fit for the district. And and we're bringing back bills that remove red tape, to get housing online much more quickly. I got bipartisan support on most of my bills. And I think are things that are going to move the ball in a lot of different areas, the really impactful things that are going to expand healthcare for women on and families and kids, babies on Medi-Cal, to get postpartum care for a whole year after having a baby. I know, instead of 3 months.
My wife, who's a state employee, gets 6 weeks disability, half pay.
I know. Well,
that's do a little better.
Yeah, we could do a lot better compared to other countries. But that, that care where people actually come to your home and support the mom and the family and the baby. A lot of times postpartum depression doesn't show up until after 6 months. So if you're getting care in the first 3 months, that's missed. So that, is something really close to my heart. And, things to address: public safety, elder abuse, and I was able to co-author some bills that I think are really great. One with Jesse Gabriel to allow for outdoor dining to continue in restaurants where, cities were really making that unaffordable for people to make permanent after they made those modifications and adjusted so many times during the pandemic. And people love outdoor dining, and it's, healthy because COVID still exists. So I feel good about really what we've been able to do this year.
I just looked at your bill list before the show, and you had this really cool bill about electric roads. That sounds awesome. What is that? And how far are we from that actually happening?
I mean, I say the time is now, especially after my experience of driving. So that was on Thanksgiving.
You got a Mach-E, right? You got a Ford Mach-E.
No, I have a Chevy Bolt EUV.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
kind of range you have on that thing?
I mean, it's supposed to be around 240, but how I drive, it's more like 180.
185.
Right. And then, going over the grapevine.
Right.
I mean, what are you, 50 miles? I don't know. So, I told my daughter, I was like, this is going to be great. It's like an experiment. We're going to drive for Thanksgiving to my brother's house. And she's like, we should really take the train. And I was like, no, it's going to be great. And then it was horrible. We had to stop 4 times. Part of it, I will admit, user error. One, like the app I was using was kind of clunky and it didn't show how fast the charger was. So I ended up at 10 o'clock in Escalon at like a county parking lot, charging on a slow charger or level 2 charger so that I could get enough charge to get to a fast charger. And we're just sitting there with our doors locked. And then, we end up at another place that also didn't have fast chargers. And there's like 12 Tesla chargers and 2 of them are being used. And then there's 4 level 2 chargers. One's being used, 2 are broken, and luckily I could get the other one.
And like level 2, for people who don't know, that's like 20 miles an hour. Not fast.
Yeah, no, it would take me 8 hours for my car to fully charge. And so I found a fast charger down the street. So finally, my daughter's just beside herself. It's like 10:30 at night. We're in a mall parking lot. She's just crying. And she's like, I told you we should have taken the train.
Fossil fuels are the way, Mom.
I know. So yeah, it was an eye opener for me. And I actually found out about basically being able to charge your car while you drive, wireless charging for your car, from another woman who was at a charger. For the first 3 months I got my car, I didn't have charging at home. So I was on the public charge. So I was out there, elbowing my way into getting a charge before I had to go to a meeting or something. And I was talking to a woman who was also waiting to charge, and she told me about this technology. And so I started looking it up, and they've been doing it in Europe. They're starting to do test models here in the United States. They have a couple happening in Michigan. They have a proof of concept out in Nevada, and it's actually being used by electric buses here in California and Washington State. They do more, there's a charging pad at bus stops, and that extra 10 minutes, while they're at a major stop and they need to take a break and, let people on. It allows them to run those buses for 12 to 14 hours a day without stopping to charge.
That's awesome.
It's huge. And imagine if you electrified, patches of the 5 and you could charge every 10 miles or something like that, then it would not take 4 extra hours to drive from LA to Sacramento. And also, I mean, it's an equity issue. People who don't have charging at home, like I didn't in the beginning. That's the big problem,
right? Because everyone's like, oh, you have all these apartments, a housing issue, you don't have parking anymore.
Where are you going to have all these chargers unless they're like as prevalent as a parking meter? Right. And so, people can charge while they're driving to work. They can, the huge trucks, there's all of these, discussion about.
It solves the battery issue too, right?
Yeah, you don't need as large of a battery. All you need is for when you're off the major highways. Yeah. Yes. And there's all this investment happening right now, around infrastructure because the huge federal investments in infrastructure. Right. I'm just like, trying to bang the bell and get people's attention on this because if we're going to be replacing roads, we should be thinking about including this kind of technology and really, moving this ball forward. It's why I requested to have a select committee, electric vehicle and infrastructure select committee. We're going to be having a hearing where we're going to talk about electric roads and other innovation that's happening, highlighting what the Antelope Valley Transit is doing. Yeah, so we're having that hearing October, November, coming up. And I think it really, it's a game changer. Right. And I think it's something we just need to jump ahead. We're going to need all kinds of charger. We will still need plug-in chargers. We'll still need all of those things, right. But this really would go a long way to addressing our charging infrastructure needs that we will need to be able to make our transition to electric vehicles.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Water is always one of our hot topics here on this show. People love it.
Yes.
You have a water protection bill that is currently sitting on Gavin Newsom's desk. What
Yes.
is that?
So I would say I have two that actually help protect water, but the one you're talking about is also really important in our district. So there's a mine called Cemex that would be the second largest aggregate mine, which is gravel, in all of North America. And
Cemex?
Cemex.
The big
Mhm,
cement. Yeah. Okay.
And it would be right in Santa Clarita. They've been trying to get fully permitted for 30 years. It's been in process for 30 years. It would be
Just wait for that stamp.
there might be some opposition.
Oh.
So, but it's right next to the Santa Clara River, and not to confuse people. Yes, there is a Santa Clara River that goes through Santa Clarita. I don't know why, but
St. Clair, very popular.
Maybe
200 years ago.
Must have been it. And it's one of the only natural rivers in Southern California that still exists and is running, and it supplies water to all of Santa Clarita Valley. And there would run off, anything that runs off from this mine would run into the water. We're really concerned about that. And there are people living in our community raising families who weren't even alive when they pulled this permit 30 years ago. And so we think it's important that if you have a permit pending for this long, any project that goes on so long, right, over 30 years, that the public should have an opportunity to voice concerns and or support at the state water board. And so the water board just kind of reopens an opportunity for public comment on that, to allow the public to have input, because our city has grown. So it was 3 years old. Santa Clarita was 3 years old 30 years ago.
That's crazy.
So there's a lot that's changed in our water needs in the city of Santa Clarita, and how this could really impact it.
It's kind of interesting, like, you're talking about housing, and like that's kind of the boom area, right? Because
it is
relatively close to Los Angeles, and it was affordable.
Yes.
And now it's probably not as affordable.
Not so affordable. Yeah, I know. I mean, I've heard from a lot of people who have talked about how, they moved out there because housing was affordable. There were really good schools, and now their kids can't afford to live in the town that they raised them in. Right. It's really, our housing crisis is a huge, huge issue throughout my whole district.
Is there still space to build?
There is. There's a lot of building still happening in Santa Clarita. Yeah, it's building out and out and out. And so I know there's some concerns about making sure that we do that in a safe way. But there is still a lot of building that's happening in Santa Clarita, and people are still coming, out of LA to get something that's more affordable than maybe where they live, but still, in the scheme of things, not affordable for most people.
What's a home cost? Like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath?
I have no idea. I mean, if this is a wild guess, but I would say like single family 3-bedroom, it's got to be $750, probably.
Yeah.
$750,000.
And when you moved in the area, what?
I mean, my place is not affordable for me now. I moved there 6 years ago. And I could not buy my place now. That's if crazy. I had to. Yeah. And it's just a few years. Yeah. I mean, I'm not like other people who've been in their homes for 20 years. So it's, I mean, we really, the only way that I was able to get into my first home was because there was a first-time home buyer program that helped me with the down payment. It helped a lower down payment, a lower interest rate. I didn't have to pay mortgage insurance. It really cut down on costs for me. That's how I was able to get in my first home, and then I built some equity, and that's how I was able to get in my second home when I got divorced. And so, those kinds of programs are so important for people, and it breaks my heart that we have such a generation of people who just don't believe they'll ever own a home. Right. It's unbelievable. And a lot of work to do.
I feel it. Yep.
Yes.
Aliso Canyon, a lot of talk around that, something you've been working on. Can you kind of tell our listeners a little bit about that and what you've been doing?
Yes. So Aliso Canyon in 2015 was the largest natural gas explosion in North America, maybe in the world. And it leaked gas for 5 or 6 months. And it's, the topography of it is the Aliso Canyon storage facility is kind of on the top of the hill. Right. And then the gas just kind of stayed on the bottom and sunk down into the canyons and all down through the community of Porter Ranch, which is right next to it on the hill there. And then it comes down into the San Fernando Valley where we have Northridge and Granada Hills and Chatsworth, where I live. People got sick in those areas. People were, getting rashes, nosebleeds. Animals were dying. People have gotten these rare forms of cancer. Like, there are huge, huge health impacts. They had to move 2 whole schools out of the community and put them into another couple of schools for a whole semester, the rest of the school year. People had to move out of their homes and lived in hotels for many months. I mean, it was a huge, huge impact. And because of that, they restricted their gas storage. It was restricted most recently to 40%. There was just the CPUC just took action to increase it, which I opposed. Henry Stern, who's the overlapping senator, opposed. Brad Sherman, the congressman, opposed. Actually, Adam Schiff, federal legislators weighed in on it. Everybody opposed. 100% of the people I would talk to in the district opposed it. But they still chose to increase it, which was incredibly, incredibly frustrating and disappointing, and I think very short-sighted when they literally have a proceeding right now talking about closing it in 2027, and they're increasing the gas storage. Wow. And, more pressure is a bad idea at a place that's had a bunch of leaks and still has leaks, honestly. Yeah. I was up there canvassing during my campaign, last summer, and I smelled gas when I was up there. I mean, it's not abnormal for people to go hiking and smell gas. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it's solved. Right. And there's a real concern of the continued health impacts that people are experiencing there. So we fought very hard against that. Unfortunately, the CPUC, I think, made a bad choice and decided to increase it anyway. Mm-hmm. But hopefully this larger proceeding, they will soon be putting forward a real plan to shut it down. Yeah.
So you just finished your first year, mm-hmm. Getting ready to go into the off season here, gearing up for next year. Kind of what are your priorities for next year? Are the 3 H's going to prevail again next year, or are you going to look at some other things?
Yeah, we definitely want to continue to work on the 3 H's: housing, healthcare, homelessness. Those are things that I want to continue to have an impact around.
Solve those, please.
Yeah, I know. That's what I told my chief of staff when I came up. I said, look, let's just solve homelessness.
Figure it out. Yeah.
So, I mean, there is a solution there if there is the will. And, I think housing is the number one solution that we really can focus on. There's a lot of effort around mental health and drug treatment, and all of those things mm-hmm. are pieces of it. But until you have a home and you are stabilized, you can't think about going to drug treatment while you're worried about your stuff getting right. stolen or getting assaulted.
You're paranoid,
whatever's happening on the streets. You have to get housing first. And I really believe in that. And so I think, and we have to focus our policies on permanent housing. I think there's, in a rush to respond to everyone's frustration, which right. is understandable. People come at it from a different angle, but pretty much everyone's frustrated about homelessness right now. And there's so much effort to just put people somewhere. And there are a lot of options out there that are permanent housing that cost the same. And, you can get people into permanent housing. Because right now, the problem that is happening is people are getting into these temporary or interim housing, and then they're just stuck there because there's no permanent housing for them to go to. And so the real problem that we have around addressing homelessness is that there is no long-term permanent housing that people can go to. That's where I want to focus my solution. So I focused on 100%, my bill this year was focusing on getting 100% affordable housing online more quickly, removing red tape and making it easier to get state funding for affordable housing and homeless mm-hmm. housing. We need to create, build, and get people into permanent housing as quickly as possible, and then can, wrap around supportive services right. as needed.
Awesome. Well, it looks like you got your work cut out for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to stop by and tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah. And to our listeners out there, definitely recommend following Pilar on social media. It's a great follow. Thank you so much, Pilar. It was great talking with you, and I hope we can catch up sometime next year, maybe.
I would love that. Thanks,
Once
Jared.
you figure out the electric roads and the homelessness.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks.